Hey guys, all right, I want to just do a really quick video about something I get questions a lot about, and it's a really simple concept that actually took me a long time before I realized it. It was probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 years into my career before I had somebody teach me this. So hopefully it will be helpful to you. What we're looking at here is the real estate purchase contract. This is at the very bottom, and we're looking at the offer and time for acceptance. And so let's say that I receive an offer, I'm the listing agent, I receive an offer, and it's giving me till 5 p.m. Uh, tomorrow to accept it, okay? And I call my clients and they say, ooh, we're working till 6 o'clock tomorrow. There's no way that we can get to this before then. We can't take our phones at work, whatever, right? So whatever the reason is, they cannot accept that. Maybe they're just non-responsive. There's lots of reasons why we miss this deadline. And so the next day, when I talk to them, it's 7 or 8 o'clock at night. We've missed our 5 p.m. deadline. And let's say that I want to accept their offer, but I know I've missed the deadline. And so I come back, or maybe I want to counter just a couple of things, right? So I come back and I go to addendum 1. And by the way, sometimes agents have this question, it says addendum, but it's really a counter offer. That's okay. You just check the counter offer box right there. So the difference between an addendum and a counter offer is an addendum is something that you would add to an already complete contract. So we're trying to add to it. A counteroffer, we don't yet have a complete contract yet. We're countering the offer that was made. So let's say we come back here and we want to counteroffer on price. We'll just make it simple. So let's say their offer price was 500. So we're going to come in here and we're going to say purchase price rather be 510,000. Okay. So let's say that's the only thing that we wanted to change about their contract, but we've missed our deadline, right? Our deadline was 5 p.m. It's now 8 p.m. So I used to come in and say, seller's response time to be, let's give myself an hour, 9 p.m. today, which is the 21st. Okay. So now, are we good to go? This is the only thing that I wanted to change. I wanted the purchase price instead of their offer their offer said 500. I wanted it to be 510. And I feel like I need to address the fact that I missed that acceptance deadline. Now, you'll notice a couple of things here. And hopefully you've stayed watching and didn't quit this 30 seconds ago thinking, hey, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. This is a response time that I've set here. Seller's response time to be 9 p.m. But if we go back and we look at the previous form, and we scroll all the way down to the bottom for that section, if seller does not accept this offer by 5 p.m., this offer shall lapse. Is that a response time or an acceptance deadline? And this is something that, again, I didn't learn this until probably 10 or 15 years in. So if you're hearing this for the first time and you've been around for a long time, it's okay. People miss this and it's not taught often or well, maybe, I don't know. But that's why I'm making this video, is this is an acceptance deadline, okay? The deadline for me to accept their terms exactly as they wrote them ended at 5 p.m. If I want to make a counteroffer, which I did want to do, then I've gone over here to my addendum 1 and I've written my counteroffer. I don't need to mention my response time, okay? Because I didn't miss a response deadline, I missed an acceptance deadline. So let's give an extreme example of this. Let's say that my clients, or maybe me, I don't know, that would be really bad if I went out of town for a week and didn't have anybody cover for me. But let's say for some reason, it's been an entire week that's passed since they made that offer. And we come back and we say, you know what? I was sick with hantavirus, whatever. Now I'm back. I'm looking at your offer. We would like to entertain it. but we want the purchase price to be a little bit higher. And we're an entire week later. Can I just do that? And the answer is yes. So a counteroffer is basically me as the seller in this case, writing an offer back to the buyers. And I can do that at any point in time. I can do that a day after the acceptance deadline. I can do it a week after the acceptance deadline. I can do it a month after the acceptance deadline. Because up here I'm saying, hey, this is a counteroffer to that purchase contract that was written, well, in this case, it was written today, right? Between the buyer and the seller. So we're referencing the purchase contract. So let's say that this was written back on the 1st. Hey, we're referencing this offer that you made almost an entire month ago, and we want to counter that. And that's fine. And I don't have to put any type of a response deadline down here because it isn't a response deadline. It's an acceptance deadline. Now, the other thing that I want to note with this training, we'll just make this a general training about addenda, these acceptance deadlines, how it all works, is that to have a clean one, right, we need to understand this last paragraph well. And a lot of agents miss this or it's glossed over or something. But it's to the extent the terms of this addendum modify or conflict with any provisions of the REPSI, including all prior addenda and counteroffer, these terms shall control. All other terms of the REPSI, including all prior addenda and counteroffers not modified by this addendum, shall remain the same. So basically, I only want to counter or mention things in here that I want to keep. Or excuse me, I only want the opposite of that. I only want to mention things in here that I want to change. The things that I want to keep do not need to be mentioned in here because it specifically says all other terms not modified this shall remain the same. So it basically says all those other terms, we're willing to accept those. All right. So let's say that we say purchase price to be 510 and we want something else. We're going to say the, and by the way, I like to reference things. So just to make it easy to navigate these contracts later on. So I could say section 2.1 purchase price to be this. Right? That's how I would like to see it. Section 2.1 purchase price to be 510 instead of 500. And then let's say that I also want to change a let's say I want to change a deadline. Okay. Let's say that we want to change section 24A because as a seller, we don't think we can get our, we've had some resistance from the HOA and they haven't gotten us all the documentation we need yet and we're frustrated with them, but we're not going to be able to meet our seller disclosure deadline. And the seller disclosure deadline that they gave us was next Tuesday and we want to make it later than that. Okay, so let's say that there's a couple of things. So we get this offer and they've given us a seller disclosure deadline of May 26th and an offer price of 510. So we come back here and we're going to say here, section 2.1, purchase price to be 510. And then I've got to go back because I don't remember. But I'm going to go back and look at section 24A. Section 24A. And that's the seller disclosure deadline to be, I'll look at my calendar and give myself an extra week for that one and put it 527. Okay. All right. So now we've addressed two different things that we want changed as the seller. And even though we've missed our acceptance deadline, we're not accepting the contract. That's okay. So I don't have to mention anything about our response time because that's not necessary here. And we've addressed these two things. Everything else in the contract we're okay with. We're okay with everything else, right? So if there's anything that I wanted to change, I would need to put it here. What I don't want to do is reiterate anything that I liked, okay? So if I wanted to let's say that I liked the finance and appraisal deadline. I don't need to go in here and reiterate any of that stuff. That language is already covered down here. I'm just mentioning the couple things that I want to change. And that keeps us clean, and it keeps us from setting a precedent where sometimes you say, well, maybe I'm just going to put it in there to clarify my intent. I'm like, you don't need to do that, because once you get up to addenda 10, 11, 12, 13, which I've seen contracts do, are you seriously going to be clarifying your intent on every accepted item? And yet you've set a precedent for the first 4 or 5 addenda that that's what you did, and therefore you've created confusion, and confusion leads to lawsuits. Okay? So just use the contracts the way they were intended to be used. If you need to educate the other agents, maybe even in an email, or heaven forbid, you give a phone call to the other agent and talk them through what it is that you're saying. Say, hey, we like everything else. These are the 2 things we need changed. This is why we need them changed, right? And so we give the buyer now until 5 o'clock the next day to respond. And we send this over to the buyer, okay? And then the buyer comes back and says, well, let's say that the buyer loves it all, right? And the buyer says, we really like all this. And by 5 p.m., they can check acceptance. So they do so. By 5 p.m., they've checked acceptance. They've signed it, dated it, everything like that. And they've communicated that acceptance over to us. And by the way, just as a quick side note to this, acceptance is defined in the purchase contract down here, and it occurs only when all of the following have occurred. The seller buyer has signed it, indicating acceptance, and they or their agent has communicated to the other party that it has been signed as required. It doesn't have to be sent. It doesn't have to be received, right? So let's say that I'm meeting my client at 8 o'clock at night. We go over this. We like it. We sign acceptance on it. And I call you up, or I shoot you a text and say, hey, we've just signed acceptance, but it's going to be 9 o'clock before I get back to my home office, where I'm going to scan this in and send it to you. Please confirm receipt of this text, acknowledging that we have accepted it. And if they say, got the text, thank you, at that minute we're under contract, because all of the following have occurred. My clients have signed it, and it has been communicated. And communication, by the way, needs to be affirmed. I can't just send an email, send a fax, whatever, without acknowledgement. If I don't get that acknowledgement, communication hasn't occurred. So I need to make sure that communication occurs, because we've got a deadline for that to happen. Okay? So clients like it. Everybody signed acceptance down here. We're all good to go. And then later on, something comes up that we want to change. And so now we've got maybe the lender says, hey, we need to change this to an FHA loan. So this is now addendum number 2 to the contract. We're referencing the contract there. And we say that it's an FHA loan. We put in all of these other details down here, the purchase price, etc. And this would be added on. So this isn't the best example, because I don't have the little box that says this is an addendum or a counteroffer. This is an addendum. All right. So we're not counter offering anybody with this. This is just being added on to the existing contract. And as such, if the seller, let's say the seller gets this and they say, you know what, we're not comfortable with that. We know that there's maybe a few things that need to be done to the house, some railings that are missing, some peeling paint. It's middle of winter. We're not going to be able to do those repairs. We're not willing to do those repairs, whatever their reasoning is. They get this FHA addendum and they say, no, we're rejecting it. Okay. Now what that does is that rejects just this addendum. It does not nullify the rest of the contract. So we still have an existing contract that's in place with the purchase contract and addendum 1. That still is moving forward. And so if the buyer says, well, hey, if you reject this addendum, we're not going to be able to get financing. We're going to have to cancel the contract. Okay, they can do that. That's a whole separate issue, and they'll have to go through and use the cancellation. But just the fact of the seller rejecting this does not automatically nullify or cancel the contract. All they've done is rejected this one addendum. And so let's say that later on, further down the road, maybe they figure out their financing, they stay with the deal, they say, okay, I guess we can do conventional. It's not the best terms for us, but we can figure it out. We really love the home, so we want to keep at it. And further on down the deal, they decide that, maybe they need an extension to a deadline, or they just want a couple minor repairs or something like that. And so they go in here and say, hey, we need to add a new addendum to this. So they come back and, sorry, I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. We're going to add a new addendum to it. Okay. And so we're now down to this new addendum where we're going to ask for a couple of simple, I don't know if I want to make a repairs. Let's say we're going to ask for some closing costs, okay? Because there is a separate repair addendum, and it's called the resolution of due diligence addendum. I don't know that that's in here. So we're going to do a simple one. We're going to ask for a little bit of closing costs, okay? And that's kind of nice. I can just drag and drop it over there. And then I hit load selected clauses. Now this one, okay? So if you notice, if I go back, we had our purchase contract, we had addendum 1, which we accepted. Addendum 2 was rejected. So we want to save this because the Division of Real Estate requires to keep copies of all offers accepted or rejected. We're going to save this addendum 2 in .loop, which we use here at Equity. We're going to save it in the loop. We're just going to archive it though. Okay, so archiving it means it's not deleted. It's there, it can be referenced, but it's not cluttering up our loop. It's not confusing to us. So we have this, it's in the loop, but it's archived. And now we've added a new addendum. What number is the new addendum? Okay, this new addendum is actually number 2 because that other attempt at adding number 2 got rejected. So all we have now is a purchase contract addendum 1. This is not addendum 3 because addendum 2 was never added to it. All right, so we just had addendum 1. This one is now addendum 2. All right, and we're attempting to add an addendum. This isn't a counteroffer. Okay, we're attempting to add on to the existing contract. It's an addendum, and we've got our closing costs mentioned here. And it is important that we use the correct form for this. Let's say we're just asking for $5,000 in closing costs. If I hand wrote this in, instead, if I said seller to pay up to $5,000 of buyer's closing costs, you'll notice the big difference when you actually read the language and the problems that this can create for you. So it's very important to know your forms. You're solving problems, not creating problems. So if I had not known that this closing cost addendum existed and I just wrote in my own language, then what happens when I get to closing? And some of those closing costs, seller pay up $5,000 buyer's closing costs, were actually prepaids, right? I needed that money to prepay my taxes, my insurance, whatever it was. I was using some of it for prepaids. Well, technically then, the other agent could come, when they're reviewing the settlement statement, and say, whoa, we agreed to pay $5,000 of buyer's closing costs. We're not paying their prepaids. We're not paying for a rate buy down, right? We're paying for their closing costs. And we want to be very strict with our language. Well, they would probably win that argument. And so that's why this language was created, is because that argument was being made a lot. Agents were suing each other, clients were suing each other, whatever, complaints are being filed. And so our UAR, Utah Association of Realtors, our attorneys get together, and most of these forms, by the way, if you come down here at the bottom, most of these forms are copyrighted by the UAR, the attorneys that have created it. They're provided to us by them. That's one of their services. So if I've used the correct form, then the seller is contributing $5,000 to be applied at buyer's discretion toward any of the following. I can use it as a rate buy down. I can use it for my financing costs. I can use it for closing costs. I can use it for prepaids. And even if there's anything left over, I could use it to reduce the purchase price if I wanted to. Basically, I get all of this $5,000 to be applied to whatever I need it to be applied to. And if I didn't know that and I just wrote this language in, I have now created problems, potential lawsuits, definitely threats, and maybe a lot of drama that my clients didn't need, that I didn't need, and that my broker didn't need because I didn't know the right forms were there. Okay, so we've covered a few different concepts here. We've talked about acceptance and not it's not a response deadline, it's an acceptance deadline. We've talked about how to number addenda properly when one gets rejected, what to do with that rejected addendum. We still keep it in the loop. We just archive it so it doesn't kind of make things look cluttered or messy. And all of that keeps us compliant with the division. And then when we um, when we do counter, and let me go back to our, in fact, I'll use the drop down here. The other thing that we've covered is when we do counter things, it is really nice and it makes it clean to reference exactly where we're countering. So section 2.1, purchase price to be 510 instead of, what was written there was 500, but I don't need to say purchase price to be 510 instead of 500. I just need to state exactly what it's going to be. Seller disclosure deadline. We're going to extend that a little bit as well. All right. Hopefully this was helpful to you. A little kind of a baby deep dive into addenda, acceptance deadlines, etc. I appreciate you joining me, and I appreciate your dedication to building your knowledge. It builds your value, and that builds your wealth. Thank you.